The Enigma machine, an iconic encryption device, was developed by German engineer Arthur Skerbius. It was used by the German military to secure their communication. The Enigma machine appeared as a typewriter-like device but contained a complex system of rotors, wires, and connections. Its operation was based on a substitution cipher, transforming each letter of the plaintext message into a different letter of the encrypted text. The settings of the rotors, which determined the encryption pattern, were changed daily. This made deciphering the messages an immense challenge, as interceptors needed knowledge of the rotor settings to decrypt the encoded information. Despite its apparent invincibility, a team of code breakers at Bletchley Park, led by Alan Turing, successfully cracked the Enigma code. They developed the Turing bomb, an electronic computer that helped decrypt intercepted messages. This breakthrough provided invaluable intelligence to the Allies and significantly influenced the outcome of the war. The Stuck 3 was a German self-propelled assault gun based on the chassis of the Panzer III tank. It was designed to provide direct fire support to infantry units. It was heavily armored and featured a low-profile design, making it effective for defensive operations. Its main armament was a 75mm Stuck 40L48 gun, which was capable of penetrating most Allied tanks of the time. While the Stuck 3 saw extensive service on the Eastern Front, and was not as common on the Western Front, some Stuck 3 units were deployed during the Normandy campaign to counter the Allied invasion. The M40 Stahlhelm, or German steel helmet, was the standard helmet used by the Wehrmacht. It featured a distinctive coal scuttle shape that became an iconic element of German propaganda. The M40 helmet provided good protection against shrapnel and other battlefield hazards, and was widely used by German troops on all fronts during World War II. After the war, the Luger was the standard sidearm of the German military during World War II, having been adopted in 1908. It saw extensive use on both the Western and Eastern fronts throughout the conflict. It was a toggle-locked, recoil-operated semi-automatic pistol, chambered in either 7.65 by 21 mm or 9 by 19 mm parabellum. The Luger had an effective firing range of 50 meters and a muzzle velocity of 350 to 400 meters per second with the 9mm cartridge. Production of the iconic Luger continued during the war years, with some minor modifications. While the Walther P38 eventually replaced it as the main German military pistol, large numbers of Lugers remained in service until the end of the war. Captured Luger pistols were subsequently used by Allied forces and other militaries during and after the war. Located at the junction of New Bond Street and Grafton Street, London, this bench sculpture shows Sir Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt chatting. It is by Lawrence Holofcener. Created 1995, marking 50 years since the end of World War II. Restored 2020.
June 6th is a day which will be marked in the memory of every man and woman in the world. June 6, 1944 is the day on which the United Nations flung their might against enslaved Europe and against Japan as well. For there is only one war, and no part of it is unimportant or forgotten. It is being waged in Europe, and it is being waged in the Pacific, the Aleutians, and in the furthest outposts of China, Burma, and India. It is being waged wherever a soldier or a sailor of the United Nations is on duty. For all these men are fighting together against one common enemy, the Germans and the Japanese. You know that an infantryman killing a Nazi on the bloody beaches of Normandy brings us closer to Tokyo, and that a tail gunner shooting down a Zero over New Guinea aids his buddies on the road to Berlin. Berlin or Tokyo, which was to be first? The general staffs, in planning the war, came to the decision Germany would have to be knocked out first. We knew that Hitler could survive without Japan, but Japan would have a tough time without her Nazi ally. Once Germany surrendered and the force which had been directed against her could be turned towards Japan, complete victory was inevitable. So at the Tehran Conference in November 1943, the time and place of the invasion were decided upon in principle. General Eisenhower, chosen Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Allied Expeditionary Forces, was to have full discretion to name D-Day and H-Hour. With all possible speed, he turned the meadows and cliffs of England into training grounds for thousands of British, American, and Canadian soldiers, and assembled the gigantic pile of material necessary. He brought men who had pioneered in those daring amphibious landings in the South Pacific to his headquarters, that he might profit from their experience gained at Guadalcanal and Kwajalein. During the months preceding June, the air forces of America and England pounded Europe and the invasion coast night and day. Hitler waited. Tojo waited. The world waited. General Eisenhower's men were ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
My fellow Americans,
During World War II,
Last
the
night,
U.S. military
when I
identified
spoke
the
with
need
you
for a more practical
about
combat
the fall
knife
of Rome,
that could serve as both a fighting
I
and
knew
utility
at
tool.
that moment
This led to the development of the
troops of the
1219
United
C2
States
combat
and
knife,
allies
which was adopted by the U.S. Marine Corps in 1942 and later designated the USMC Mark II. The new design, produced by companies like Union Cutlery, addressed shortcomings of previous trench knives like the U.S. Mark I. After some initial hesitation, the Marine Corps embraced the Kabar, as it became known, which was widely issued to and utilized by Marines during combat operations in World War II. Atop one of the bunkers at WN62, where Heinrich Severlo was stationed, stands the Combat Medics Memorial on the beach. WN62's main armament included two 75mm cannons housed in H669 casemates. By D-Day, one of the guns had been relocated. The cannons were positioned to face west along the beach, with large concrete walls extending outward at the front to shield them from direct frontal attacks. This is one of the two Type 669 casemates at WN62, which housed a 75mm gun at D-Day, facing west. This is the Normandy American Cemetery, located in Colleville-sur-Mer, right behind WN62. It serves as the final resting place for 9,389 American military personnel who lost their lives during the D-Day landings and subsequent operations in World War II. The cemetery also features the Walls of the Missing, which honors 1,557 individuals whose remains have not been identified. With over 1 million yearly visitors, it is one of the most visited places in Normandy. Quentin Roosevelt, the youngest son of President Theodore Roosevelt, lost his life in aerial combat in World War I in 1918. Following the establishment of the permanent cemetery, Quentin's remains were reinterred in Normandy, resting alongside his brother, Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr. At 56 years old, Theodore led the assault on Utah Beach on D-Day and received the Medal of Honor for his bravery. He passed away from a heart attack in France in 1944, about a month after the invasion.
The Festung Europa, walled in by the formidable defense in depth of the Atlantic Wall. Mined, trapped, bristling with gun emplacements and fortifications. Initial effort by land, sea, and air would be made in this area, spearheaded by troop carrier and airborne forces.
The U.S. 101st Airborne Division will begin landing approximately 4 hours and 30 minutes prior to civil twilight on the morning of D-Day to assist the 4th Division in the initial assault and capture the town of Carentan. The U.S. 82nd Airborne Division will land to the immediate west of the 101st for the purpose of preventing the movement of enemy reserves to the east and north. Due to the movement of 2 additional German divisions into the peninsula, the 82nd will not land at Saint-Sauveur. The 82nd and 101st Divisions will both land around Saint-Mare-Église, 5 miles from the east coast. The 82nd Division will secure the causeways and lines of communication to the north and across the inundated area to prevent enemy reinforcements from being brought to the beachhead. The 101st Division will proceed south and capture Carentan. The forces which will come across the beach will proceed inland to reinforce this vertical envelopment.
Airborne infantry file into buses for their last land-borne ride until D-Day. And grab a few moments to read letters from home and write a few lines. But this is business, and you want to be sure you're in business when the time comes. So you take inventory of your stock and trade and keep everything clean and shining and ready. Troop carrier and airborne have their final inspection. This outfit has enough Apache blood in its collective veins to justify their haircut. .925 troop-laden aircraft will home tonight on navigation aids set up by these pathfinders. This is 1 minute out of 1 hour in one day in the world's history that has rarely been equaled. These are the first ships to take off in the airborne invasion of Fortress Europe. First Pathfinder ship is airborne at 2154. As the Pathfinders head for the coast of France, other C-47s move into position for their takeoff at the head of the runway. 30 minutes after the Pathfinders take off, the first serials of C-47s follow on the invasion path.